everyone. This is the Vintage Card Voyage, and today we're going to talk about card grading. And there's a lot of videos about card grading, but we're going to talk about a few things. One is the question I think a lot of people have, which is to grade or not to grade.
That is the question.
And if you're like me and Mark, there's often times where you get cards and you wonder, should I grade it or not? So we're going to actually go through case studies of times where we made a good decision to grade and times where we made maybe not a good decision. Yes. And then we're also going to talk about how we both have our preferred card grading company and why that might be.
Right.
Yeah. So Mark, would you like to go first and talk about, let's talk about a win.
Sure.
That you've had.
Yeah, so I recently sent in about 19 or so on one of their monthly specials a few months ago, back in February, I want to say. And so my win was this Kobe Bryant, which was, I had submitted thinking it was going to get a 7. That was my assumption based on, I think there was like, it's a white front, and so there's like little kind of specks on there that I thought I saw, and then in the back I think the back was clean, but I was like, they'll probably ding it for the stuff on that happening on the front. Well, it actually got a 9, and so that value went up, I want to say like probably 3x, probably something like that. So that was definitely not expected.
And this one is more of a rare one. Is that an insert? Is that an insert?
Flare, yeah, showcase, Flare showcase, and so it's 4 of 20. So I guess it must have been an insert of some sort. I wasn't buying during this time. This is something that I just came across from a collection I've gotten. That was definitely a pleasant surprise. Whereas my loss was the most graded of cards ever with the 89 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. I have a couple of these, and I thought this was the best chance I had at a 10. I looked at it like a lot of people say like that little thing in the back, the hologram in the back, like needs to be perfectly centered. I'm like, this looks pretty well centered, and so I was like, okay. And then everything else looked pretty centered. Overall, it ended up getting an 8, which still a little more valuable than like a raw card, I think, but like pretty close, whatever. So lost a lot of value on that potentially, or not a lot of loss, but what I thought it was going to be.
So I'll talk about a win I had, and I graded with SGC, and we'll talk about why that is my preference. But I bought a card at a card show, and it was this card. It's on my phone. I don't have the card here because I sold it on eBay. It's a 1972 Rayfield Wright, and it graded a 5. I actually thought it was going to grade higher, but then when I put it on eBay, it went quickly. I sold it for $230, and then after fees, it was basically about $200. So there's, $130 gain there. So that's well within the range of what I call the value gap, because with SGC you're paying $15 a card, and then they're shipping it otherwise.
Right.
But that's I'm finding not that easy to discover. Finding a lot of these kinds of wins. Unfortunately for me, there's a lot of losses, and I'll show a few of them. This is one of them, which is this is a card I picked up, and it's a Gary Carter rookie card, 1975.
Right.
And you might be able to pick it up right away. Of course, it comes back authentic.
It's tilted.
And I thought it was a diamond cut. You get those diamond cuts.
Right.
And I looked at it quickly, and it seemed pretty sharp, but there's trimming.
Yeah,
there's trimming. So,
yeah.
it's good to actually measure the card so you can see it's in this corner.
Oh yeah.
Where the trimming exists.
Got it.
Yeah. And then another loss for me, unfortunately, is this 1952 Topps. Joe Ostrowski, I think is how you say it, and it's a Yankees card. And the reason I submitted for grading is like it's pretty well centered for an old card.
Right.
Good condition. There's one light crease in the top left. And I thought even if I got a 2 or a 3 or a 4 because it was a Yankee,
Right.
it was a 52 set, which is an iconic set.
Sure.
I could sell it, and I have not been able to sell it on eBay. it just lingers there. So I do think that with vintage, a lot of times people are looking for higher grade vintage.
Mm.
They'll buy the authentics and 1s and 2s, but I think with the really like Hall of Fame high end players, not this, you know, kind of common card.
Right.
Yeah. So in my book, that's a loss.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that what will be interesting is for us to talk about, like, you know, the reasons why you like PSA.
Right.
The reasons I like SGC.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different criteria. So I'll talk first about cost.
Yeah.
Cost is obviously a big consideration. SGC has something that I really like, which is just $15 per card. It's super simple. There's no deviation. Occasionally they have sales, but for the most part, it's $15 a card, and it's been that way for a while.
Right.
And then PSA, how do they charge?
So yeah, Ken, you brought up cost.
Yeah.
So for PSA, obviously there's a range of costs, and I am a PSA member, so I pay I think it's $99 a year, maybe it's $119 now, I don't remember, they keep changing it. Because of that, I get to have these like specials that they have, the bulk specials, whatever, and so I think it's like the cheapest regular price is like $19, $18.99 I think, per card. Though they have sometimes their monthly specials where it's down to like, I think $15.99, $14.99, something like that, it varies. But you have to send in a certain amount, and you know, and it has to be like $500 or less in value for the card. And then they'll obviously upcharge you if it's higher or whatever, if they find it better, which is a good problem to have. But yeah, it ranges from there, 19 to 25 to 40 to 75 to 130, then 250 and like 500. I think is like one of the highest. And then that's before, like, if a card if that's $10,000 or more, it goes up even further than that. I think. So yeah, whereas SGC,
no matter the value, it's $15. The interesting thing is that, as I think people probably know, PSA has now acquired SGC.
Acquired Collectors, which owns now, I think it's Collectors, I think, that purchased SGC, which also owns PSA.
So I'm worried they're going to change the pricing model to be like PSA, and if you've submitted to SGC, you know this, they ask you for a estimated value. And I've always wondered, why do they ask for that if it's not going to change the pricing? But I think they're just collecting data, and pretty sure the data will say they could make more money if they have a sliding pricing variable scale. So yeah, so that one is a clear differentiation, I think, between how the two companies operate. And I like simple math. So it's just easy for me to know, like, in my mind, if I grade this, will it increase the value by $20? The other factor is, just by grading it makes it more liquid. It just makes it easier to sell.
Right.
And you're not in a situation where people are scrutinizing that, or guessing the value of the card. Now you have a third party. So that has value too.
Right. And I feel like part of the sliding scale of PSA has to do with the fact that dealers, collectors, whatever, value PSA more from a like valuation perspective or whatever. That might be part of it. I have no idea.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it might just be because I'm biased, but I do feel like the gap is starting to shrink. Yeah. That PSA, I've seen PSA 8s with SGC 8s, and sometimes it's flipped.
Oh, interesting.
Sometimes it just depends on the card, and it is true. You really should look at the individual card, because one 8 might be better than the other 8.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think with vintage, especially, a lot of people are much more concerned about centering or whatever, and so so you're paying for PSA's valuation down the road in a way with the sliding scale, I think.
The second thing is turnaround time.
Right.
So in terms of turnaround time, I've been submitting to SGC about once a month. And I do a bulk, 50 cards or more. And I can tell you that my last submission, they turned it around in 7 business days.
Wow.
They target 5 to 10. Then in April it was 15 days.
Okay.
And in February it was 13 days. So it generally is 5 to not 10, but 5 to 15 business days. But they're pretty consistent, pretty reliable.
That's good.
And that's another reason I like them, because one experience I had way back during COVID was with Beckett, and it took over a year, I think, for me to get the cars back.
Yeah, I know. I remember people complaining about PSA with that respect. Like it was like sometimes up to 18 months before they were being back. I think they shut down for a little bit, and so they just had all the cards in their warehouses or whatever. I mean, with PSA, it's longer. I mean, like the cheaper one takes longer, and I think it's like 45 days, I believe, for the 1999 or the 1899, I should say. The special that I did for February, where I submitted those cards I talked about earlier, I think they had said I think it's a 50-day business day turnaround, I should say. And I think I got mine in about, I want to say 30 business days, I think. So that was a pleasant surprise. So that's definitely a ding against PSA. But again, it's the volume, I'm pretty sure, of just what's being sent. I think they have like 80% of the market, something like that, and so that's probably why. Yeah, I'm guessing, but
I would think that's going to improve over time. It's already improved quite a bit from year to year, so I would think it'll improve. Yeah. The other thing we've already talked about is increased card value, or what I call the gap. It's really hard for me to know, like, I would say in general, most of the time I grade, I'm achieving that about a $20 gap. But obviously, the more valuable the card is, you tend to have a bigger gap happening. I will submit, cards of Hall of Fame rookie cards that are maybe not that valuable in price. Just to have it in my PC. In general, my rule of thumb is either I'm submitting it because I'm going to resell it and I want to make sure I'm making money. So that means I want to jump up $30, $40, $50, or it's going to go into my PC. And then sometimes I do make mistakes, and then I'm just stuck with these cards. Which
it happens to everyone, because obviously it's a very subjective thing. So I mean, with me, it's funny. So there's the card value of the raw versus graded, and then there's the card value of like SGC versus PSA consideration. Because, and I don't remember who said this or where I've seen it before, but I've seen on YouTube that it tends to be like PSA and SGC are pretty even up to like a 7. And then once you hit a 7, it starts to be a divide from PSA and SGC. I know you mentioned the SGC 8s are a little different or similar, but
it just depends.
Exactly, it does depend. But I think generally speaking, it's like there's a big gap that happens. For me, like most of the stuff that I've submitted so far has been like 70s, 80s, 90s, and so all that stuff is like 10s, or like the ones I'm sending in tend to be like through the roof, and then like 9s are like 10x lower, and then like 8 is like whether you submit or not kind of is questionable, because it's like right around that like raw point, or actually not raw, but it's more about like you're paying as much as for submitting as the value of the card is going to be, so you're breaking even at best.
I mean, it feels like we're in an age where if you get a low grade for something that's 70s, 80s, 90s on, it's almost less valuable than raw. Which is disappointing. It's like, at least it's in a nice case. It's like, why does it? And for my own PC, because I'm not that anal about the high grades, I will buy a 6 or a 5 if it helps me complete my collection or a card I'm looking for.
And sometimes for me it was like I submitted like a Yount and a Brett rookie just because, honestly, I mean, I wanted to have it in a case, but also I just wanted to see like this is my first grading submission, like where am I? Whereas as far as like whether I'm like know what I'm doing or not. So that's a consideration, obviously. And that's actually the next thing we were going to talk about. I think was like the ability to pre-grade. It's been a challenge for me personally. I mean, I'm usually like, I think I did a real quick like over my grading history, kind of where I'm at, and of the cards that I've graded so far, I think like 25% are like right on it, same grade. 50% are like one grade off. And among those 50% is like, I think 75% of those are like one grade lower. And when, obviously the other ones. And then like, I think another 20% were like 2 grades off one way or the other.
Yeah. I feel like I was pretty off when I first started doing this. And I've been grading for about a year. But I've graded now a lot of cards. It's like over 300 cards. And I don't do the guessing beforehand. I'm just roughly guessing. But because I'm grading more with the same company, I have a pretty good sense now. Like I think I can get within 1, 2 is rare, 1, 1.5, because they'll do half grades, which gives me a comfort level when I'm submitting it, knowing that I think I know what this is going to end up being.
Right.
And if I look at a card and I think the value isn't going to go up, I won't grade it. I'll just keep it raw. Right. So one thing that I have noticed, which I'm sure a lot of people know, is SGC with modern cards, you tend to be pretty easily 9, 9.5, and 10. As long as there's not something you're seeing. And if you see something like a little ding or maybe a slight scratch, it'll be an 8. But it's very rare for the modern stuff to get. So that to me is also comforting, because if you get a nice card, modern card, you pretty much know you're going to get a 9 or a 10, so it maintains its value. Vintage is wide open. And I do think they're fair in grading too. So you can usually guess this is going to be around authentic. I will buy vintage cards that are damaged. Just to have in my collection, and to get the authentic doesn't mean you can't resell it. So again, it depends on the player. But I'm getting better at it.
I mean, I talked about this earlier with you, that I had this Michael Jordan SI for kids that I submitted to PSA in this last order, and it's one of those, because it's SI for kids, it's perforated, and so like it's hard for me to grade what perforation should look like necessarily, and so I had thought it looked like about a 7. Again, very not sure of myself, and then gets back as a 3, and it's like, no, I guess not. So, it's a tough one. And then I guess the last one is customer service. And I know that there are a lot of people out there that do not like PSA's customer service, and I don't personally have that like axe to grind against them. Again, I've had limited interaction with them, so I haven't had the opportunity to know what their service is like. I mean, I don't know if part of that customer service is their ability to turn cards around quickly, or if it's more about like how responsive they are, or what have you. So I can't really say honestly how I would grade PSA in that respect.
So, sorry, with SGC, I've been pleasantly surprised. Twice now I have made an error in my submission. One time I thought I put a card in there and I didn't, and another time I had hit something twice. So it was 2 cards, and that's got to be fairly common that people will submit 2 of the same card to get graded. I've done that too. And both times, immediately, the day they receive it, somebody's actually inspecting the cards. A human is inspecting the cards, saying, we only got 52 cards, and you said you submitted 53, and then they tell you where they think the error is. And just over email, I've said, yes, I made a mistake, and then they give you a refund, or you pay more if you've submitted more than they said you have. So I've found that service has been pretty good.
That's good to hear. No, I've heard good things about SGC as well, as far as customer service goes, and so they're I think that's how they're kind of trying to differentiate themselves from PSA, because probably the word on the street is that PSA is not great, and so they're trying to make sure that they're just top notch or whatever. So, so that's kind of, I think, how we think about these things.
Yeah, and it should be interesting to see. I mean, I'm biased, but I feel like the dominance of PSA is going to slowly erode a little bit. I do hope they keep the brands different because there's distinctions in the brands and the way those companies operate.
Right.
But we'll see.
Yeah, and whether SGC will become the vintage only, like that's kind of where their, you know, specialty is, it feels like. And so, and the tuxedo, that, you know, obviously they don't want to get rid of that and make it all aligned as one. But we'll see, yeah. But yeah, we'd love to hear if you have any horror stories about grading, or if you have any, you know, wins or what have you, or like just, you know, pre-grading tips. Any of that stuff would be love to hear in the comments.
Yeah, and tell us if you're team SGC or team PSA or different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.